Are you aware of the creative team behind the show? Because I think that's probably one of the main selling points of it. Tom Morris, who's obviously our artistic director, is directing it. He's, I'm sure you know, has come from the National and was the co-director on War Horse, and this is his next major production for young people, for families and young people.
For me, there's never a single reason why we do a show or why we're doing Swallows and Amazons. There's always a combination of luck, opportunism, and unpredictable bursts of imagination. And I was having conversations with Neil Hannon of the Divine Comedy about the different things that he might like to turn into a musical.
The Divine Comedy, I began as a school band. Well, I suppose it evolved out of school bands in the late 80s. And here I am 20 years later, 10 albums under my belt, a plethora of musicians strewn in my wake. Tom Morris kept on turning up after my shows for a year or so, in about sort of the middle part of the last decade, and said, "You should write a musical." And I went, "Yes, I should."
Then he turned up one day and said, actually, I think we should do a musical version of Swallows and Amazons. And I said, Toby's ridiculous. It's a stupid idea.
I bought Swallows and Amazons to read to my daughter, but she was a bit young for it, and I just read it. And halfway through, light bulb flashed. The nugget of the story is fantastic.
The reason I wanted to make this show is because in this strange story written in the 1920s, there's a wonderful spirit of play. What the book captures and what the adaptation captures is the way in which children make stuff up, the way in which children create imaginative worlds for themselves and for each other and get lost in them. Now, if you ask why we would want to put such a show on, or why I would want to put such a show on, it's because I think that that kind of play is incredibly valuable to all of us. I think that certainly when anyone sees a child disappear under a table and turn it into a den and start making funny noises or make it into a house or a pirate ship or whatever it is, a bit of all of us wants to join in.
The story of Swallows and Amazons is about two groups of children, the four Walker children who make up the Swallows, and two Blackett girls, the Amazons, who live there, and they meet on an island. And to begin with, you've got this standoff between them, the fury that someone else has invaded what the Amazons see as their island. But eventually they become this team of 6 children playing together without the presence of a single adult.
Good night for tonight, and good night for tomorrow night, and good night for the next night, and the next night.
Robinson Crusoe.
Again? I'm taking it with me. I couldn't go to a desert island without Robinson Crusoe. And it will come in very useful for making friends with parrots and building forts and killing cannibals. You will come and wave us off, won't you?
Of course.
You can be Queen Isabella, waving goodbye to the Spanish Armada, and John can be Stout Cortez, and we'll be the conquistadors.
And then, of course, there's always the big attraction of whenever we talk to anyone about it, they said, how are you going to do the lake? This is set on a lake. Maybe this is why it hasn't been attempted before at all, or if not very often. And I think that's always intriguing. If people say, how on earth are they going to do that? Then you're in an exciting position as a theatre maker. It may flop terribly, but at least people are curious about what it might be like.
Arthur Ransome wrote this book in about 1928 to 29. It was published in 1930. And he was a journalist in his younger days. He wrote articles, but he always wanted to be a writer. His father was from the Lake District and he loved the Lake District and he'd spent a lot of time there as a boy, and so that's where he wanted to live. And he finally got down to doing what he really, really wanted to do, which was write.
I was once a kid, as were we all, and you know, sort of looking back to that period where you just could imagine anything and do anything within reason, is quite moving in a way. And when we got to really sort of work on it, we were just us three in a room together, and we got on famously, really, and sort of, it was very easy. I thought that there would be a lot more, you know, differences of opinion, but I think the nice thing about this show is that we were all pretty much of the same mind about most things.
With it being a musical, that's a whole new, that's what makes it that little bit trickier in a way, is that you then have to look at what you've got and think and talk to Neil and work out what could be best said through song, where the, you know, great song opportunities are.
Helen would write a bit, and that would give us a few more ideas, and I'd write another bit. And eventually we were sort of workshopping, and I felt great about this. It was like working in the Brill building or something, you know, sort of just beating out tunes. And for a couple of the sort of areas where we wanted songs, I think I must have written 3 or 4 absolutely separate original songs, just one being thrown out after another until I got the right one.
Aye, Captain. A big tin box of books and writing
a small aneroid barometer
are the things that need to be kept dry. Like night clothes.
I want it as a prize at school.
Hurry up, the wind's getting stronger.
3 biscuit tins with bread and tea and sugar.
Lots of eggs, separately wrapped for fear of smashes.
Frying pan, saucepan and a keg.
My primary concern for Swallows and Amazons is it the right show for Bristol, and is it a show that will connect to the people in the city? Tom and I used to have the roles of artistic director, executive director, the jobs we do now at Battersea Arts Centre. The project here is not about whether we can be a more successful theatre than the other theatres in the city. The project here is how can we be the best theatre for this city?
And any show that I make here, just as any show I make anywhere else, is a collaboration with the audience who come to see it. And I have them in mind when I'm making the show.
Bristol feels very possible to be creative in. There's a kind of ethos of generosity and of encouraging people to take risks, experiment with stuff they might not have tried before, in the kind of hope and I think understanding amongst everyone here that in order to really achieve something special, you have to potentially be able to fail.
Okay, let's take a risk and see if it can show agitation right in the parapet. No, it can't. Okay, relax, well done. Yeah, when I was at the National Theatre, I had the dream job, because my job was to come up with ideas, travel around, see theatre, meet artists, then go into the National Theatre studio and fool around in case it turned into something that might make a show. And now I'm right in the mire of it here. But partly that's because it's incredibly exciting.
So the question of risk is ever present in a business like this. This is an 18th century gem. You know, there is a huge heritage responsibility here, as well as an ongoing everyday cultural organisation. We need to work in partnership with businesses and other groups in the city. And of course, at the moment, that does feel threatened.
You're going to, first of all, your position is going to be huddled together here. This is a reed, and you're focusing the reed, okay? And then, as John is rowing, he's rowing the boat through the reeds, okay? But he's on the spot. Yeah, so you move, and you move with the row, and so you move. If you're in this position.
One more little question. You have the rowing action. Yeah. So does it go stay and then stay, or does it go back and then slightly back? Which is more effective?
Well, more truthful is that it would go surge, drift, surge, drift.
So it's actually constantly moving away.
Yeah. Go.
This is very good. We've got them, I'm sure of it. They would have challenged us long before this if they'd seen us.
I see it. It is there. That's it.
I had a question mark about the story. Is it going to connect with children now, or is it just a nostalgic story that people who read the book when they were a child might like? So we made a very, very rough version of part of the first half and invited a class of inner-city school children who had never been to the Lake District and never been sailing and never heard of Arthur Ransom to watch it. And they sat there watching it and kind of lounging around. And I thought, I don't know whether they're interested or not. And then at the end I said, you know, thank you very much for coming. If you'd like to go and chat to the actors you've just been watching and tell them what you thought about it, they'd love to talk to you. And they all just stood up, 30 of them, and swarmed to the Amazons. Just like... and then a few of them went to the Swallows. And I'd say, well, you know, what's going on? You know, and they want to be pirates. They want to be pirates, and they want to play in exactly the same way. In the Young Company here, we've been talking to children from Bristol about this story and asking them about their reaction to it. And what they're telling us is, well, yes, we do sometimes play like this, but we're not allowed to very much. We wish we could play like this more.
Largely, I'm trying to entertain the audience, first and foremost, with the music. Now, how you entertain people, it's not just about sort of making them giggle and then sort of it's gone. But I think most people feel entertained by being sort of having their lots of emotions sort of aroused. I would like people to leave the building crying tears of joy.
The theatre was built in 1766. At one point, everyone called it the Old Gaff. It was called lots of different things. Interestingly, when it was built, it was just called the theatre. Then, finally, after about 13 years of operation, it got a royal licence, which meant it was finally legally able to put on plays and not pretend that they were concerts. And then it continued with this extraordinary kind of checkered history of just surviving the bombing during the Second World War. And then in 1946, just when the Arts Council was in its sort of first flush of existence, the idea occurred to various people in London that it would be good to have a subsidised theatre outside London. And this was the first one. And the way they achieved that was by asking the Old Vic Company in London to send a company of actors here for the winter. And that's when it was called for the first time the Bristol Old Vic.
Christmas is a really unique time in a theatre like this. It's a rare opportunity to run a show for sort of 6 or 7 weeks, which means that your box office income is a lot higher. So therefore it means you can invest a lot more in the show, which means that you can have a bigger company, you can include music, you can make it slightly more spectacular.
And what we said when we arrived is that we wanted to put together an experimental programme in order to try to make a new connection between this theatre and the city. Not just the people in the city who already go to the theatre, but people who don't. And Swallows and Amazons, we hope, will be a show which anyone from anywhere in the city will be able to come and see and enjoy. We hope that this show will strengthen our relationship with parts of the city where people haven't heard of us.
Telescope I got at Christmas time. Swallow, we've yearned so long for this day to arrive, and now it has finally come. Now it has finally come. The adventure's begun.
The show goes through different processes. So there's a writing period, at which point it's Neil Hannon's and Helen Edmundson's, but Tom is guiding that process.
And the other thing is the the 2-bar vamp.
Yes.
Can we bin it?
Time.
No, Trevor, you don't do it that time. This is the bit you always get wrong, because you never jump back to the place that you're supposed to. But now, luckily for you, you don't have to. You just have to stop playing.
Well, I just knew that change was coming.
Yeah. Trevor, you're the reason why we changed it.
Let's just try it again.
So what happens is we go back to 29 and
I want
34, and then we go stop,
first
stop,
beat.
stop.
A piece of chocolate.
Telescope I got at Christmas time. Swallow, we've yearned so long for this day to arrive.
My role is to do two different things. They're really the same thing, but it's to facilitate Tom's production and what his desires are. Within that, my job is to make the music come alive dramatically in whatever way I see fit. So there'll be times when, I have to generate quite an opinion, as it were, in the form of my work. And then Tom will ask me to change it, if he wants me to, or Neil might ask me to change it. So the writer might ask me, or the director.
He has a very sort of keen ear for what's necessary in arrangement and what's not necessary. I'd kind of tend to throw the kitchen sink at things. I'm not a minimalist. But the way, the whole production is designed, with the instruments being played by the cast on stage, you have to be very careful with what you use, but largely haven't had any issues at all. I find the whole thing so exciting that I just get carried away and think, they're playing my songs. Which is in itself wonderful, because at last I'm not having to play them. I can sit in the audience and watch.
Learning music, on top of learning lines, on top of changing the scene and the set. It's quite hard work.
We are always playing a character, whether it's a character in focus or not. We're always playing a character while we're playing instruments. So the trick is to find the way that becomes part of the story, and the music underpins the story, and you're playing the music for a reason rather than playing a piece of music. I think that's the key to it, is to make the music active.
This show, as you can see, been in rehearsals, is in a style that I would call poor theatre. Now, it's still, in the terms of this theatre, it's an expensive production, but it's nowhere near as expensive as the version of it that we would have made, I think, if we were making it at the National Theatre.
But it's not really about money, it's about a style of theatre whereby you can use the audience's imagination to help create the image. So they work in their imagination to go, oh, I see, that's the sides of the boat. So when it goes on a tilt like that, you can create the tilt of a boat and the mast and everything, and the sail. The sail can be manipulated by hand rather than having a fan. So it's really using objects, everyday objects, or slightly more specific objects, to create an image, to make it come alive for the audience.
One of the elements that you might describe as poor theatre is the fact that it's an actor-musician production. I feel very strongly that one, as a singer, one is accompanied in a way in an actor-musician production in a way you can't be accompanied anywhere else, because people have to listen with such intensity. People are at different levels of musicianship themselves. They have to raise their game, and in raising their game, the ensemble is an incredible sound and has an incredible feel, and is incredibly flexible as well.
I haven't done many actor-musician shows before, actually, but I think people come from one area or the other and are fundamentally actors who have maybe played instruments before, or actors who find themselves being asked to learn an instrument for a particular job and then end up being quite good at it. So I think most actor-musicians would call themselves actors first of all, but then it's shows like this that require music on stage.
But just keep it free, and just think about lovely rather than lovely. It's very expensive to put musicals on, but at the same time, to be putting on a brand new musical as an actor-musician production, that hasn't, to my knowledge, hasn't happened before. That what you get is established musicals done in an actor-musician style or in an actor-musician idiom. And I think it's undoubtedly partly out of necessity, but the benefits of that outweigh any of the compromises that might entail, I think.
So lots of the props are incredibly simple, bits of ribbon, bits of stick, and that's an aesthetic which fits our resources here, fits the intimacy of the space here, which might actually look quite out of place if we did it in the Olivier. Although elements, I have to say, elements of that kind of theatre language exist in big Olivier productions that I've worked on, like Coram Boy or Warhorse.
So you're having to jump from brain saying, okay, I'm on stage, I'm an actor, I'm remembering my lines, I'm playing the scene convincingly with my fellow actors on stage, and then you've immediately got to just cut that off and go, okay, I'm a musician, I'm playing in the band, and I'm making this song for the people who are singing on stage, and then you go refresh, a bit like an Etch-a-Sketch, I suppose. And then you're saying, okay, now I'm working on stage as a chorus member, and I'm going to help make this boat image.
The most difficult thing about an actor-musician production is that you need to get people up on their feet and working out the practicalities of how they play and sing and move and shift scenery and puppet things in this production, at the same time as trying to work the integrity of the music and the integrity of the theatre. So you've got kind of three endeavours, or a joint endeavour, running concurrently. So we work separately with the music, and I'll just have a rehearsal where I do that. We basically get a really good sketch of what the music's like, and we put that into the rehearsal room, and then it's over to Tom.
Yes, I am the person who defines the course, and it's my responsibility to deliver the show, and I define the aesthetic of it, the world of it. I'm the person who says, it's about children playing, and we'll create the whole visual language in that spirit. But then, the people I work with, Sam Kenyon, Toby Sedgwick, to an extent Helen and Neil, although they've actually, substantially done their work already, and certainly all of the performers are all, I think, more exciting artists than I am. That's the point.
Puppeting the boat has been something that I've found sort of difficult, and obviously in rehearsals and technical rehearsals you're doing it for hours and hours at a time, and it's sort of created all sorts of funny muscles. It probably hasn't created the muscles, but I've been aware of them in the arms here and stuff, and And to also, to kind of give the boat a life while you're acting a scene is kind of learning a whole new language, really.
It's a very simple style that can put across very powerful images for an audience. As an example, if one wanted to replicate a real fire on stage, we came across a style whereby we could use what one hears of a fire, the crackling of a fire.
It's finally taken.
Looks like a real camp now.
Can we have buttered eggs for tea?
Yes.
Hurrah!
As long as the fire stays in, and we'll eat out of the common dish. Eggs awful stuff for sticking to plates.
Oh, here's John coming back. Ahoy there!
I mean, I trust the author in terms of the language. It obviously works for children, and there is something incredibly charming about the way that Ransom writes, and incredibly honest and true to real children.
You literally can be an adult in an adult frame of mind, but if your notion, your thought doesn't have the psychology that's associated with an adult, then I think it plays, and it hasn't been a problem at all. The worst thing, the only time we'd stop them is if their voice suddenly goes like la 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 like that. You say, well, that's not necessary at all.
I mean, I did ask for sort of bow boat puppet therapy because I was finding it so challenging, but they didn't actually front up with that.
Why I think the arts should be subsidised, because I think it's fair to say that to you, since you are our public. And I think that there are basically three reasons to subsidise the arts. They are in order to protect cultural heritage. They are in order to protect the possibility that artists might discover or create something which is unpredictable. And they are to improve access and participation.
If you imagine what the VAT take across the entire West End, when there's 40-odd theatres selling tickets at up to 45 quid a head, that's a significant amount of money. And you compare that to the totality of government subsidy in the arts, you start to see that actually arguments about the arts not making economic sense start to sound ridiculous.
We don't want to be singled out as the only thing that isn't cut, but it's the extent of it that's foolish, and the lack of understanding both of the value of cultural activity in its own terms and of the economic impact that it could have if it wasn't being cut to ribbons.
The greatest proportion of our budget is being spent on people. People are our main resource for this production and our main investment/expense. So we have a large cast, we have a large, fantastic creative team, most of whom need to travel from all over the country, either because of other commitments or all sorts of professional reasons.
We've got to find a clever way of doing the leading lights. We'd got some rough ideas about that. Then they set off, and Titty is left on her own.
From out of the black void again, we have things like a giant Queen Isabella, a giant parrot.
It gets a bit scary.
And some giant scythe cormorants, which can chase.
Oh, come on.
Well, actually, we did a workshop in the summer, a fair few months ago now, with I think six actors, and we were in the studio upstairs for a week, and we played around with ideas of how to create a boat on a lake in very simple, poor theatre style, and it was very informative. So the idea of the blue ribbon of the wake of the boat came out of that. The knowledge that you can create a boat with a trunk and a few planks of wood.
So then this happens. Watch this. Oh, what's happening? It's the scary man's boat. It's the scary man's boat. Oh my God, it's turning around. Oh my God. Oh, look, we're on the scary man's boat.
And we fly in a big mast. Also, Flint's boat is this shape plus the stalls, and these life buoys, which might have been round there the whole time, so the whole theatre becomes the boat, and maybe the bunting. Some will get that to extend into the theatre.
Most of the work that I really enjoy doing is that you stimulate the audience's imagination. So you set up a dynamic. It's not a reality, it's a dynamic movement. So the movement, the quality of movement that a butterfly has, if you set up that quality, the audience will see it no matter what it is. It could be just a hand doing that, whereas a moth, has a very different quality and seems to be attracted by light. So if you can find the essential quality of the movement of anything, you can transpose it.
Trevor, you've got fluidity all the time with how you're using the head in relation to the body. That's the advantage of this one. Okay, now you're after the pencil. Preening your master's head.
It's really slow, isn't it? Preening things.
Preen yourself.
They're cormorants!
Yes. No, they're not cormorants. They're harpies.
What are harpies?
They terrorise all sailors who pass too near.
What do they do?
They swoop down and peck their heads off.
Hey, don't take my... Keep still, Roger!
They've got flappy wings, but they're bin liners, and my instinct is we need to put a rod in with a hinge. We want to have a nice neck and it be able to be controlled. I want to create something that could be puppeted easily, that looks nice, but actually they don't want that. They want something very loose and wild, and I do find that quite difficult. So this is when I get notes from the actors and the director. So this is, for instance, with the cormorants. Prototype versus new built. Wings need to be bigger. No bone in wings, it's better for flying. Non-specific wings mean they can become other things. Feet. Wing to feet is fine. Bigger shears are better. Preening in both birds is very good. Neck on prototype is too long. On new is too short. Body. New. A bit of bulk is good. Not too much is like a tuxedo.
Stealers steal and creepers creep over oceans dark and deep, through the revolving doors of sleep.
Through the revolving doors of sleep. All I heard was through the revolving doors of Slee, and I'm 2 feet away from you. So it needs to go talkers talk and takers take. Then you've got 2, 3, go.
Talkers talk and takers take. Dreamers are dreaming that they are awake. Keep hearing voices on the lake. Talkers talk, takers take.
Good. It's really hard, yeah, really. And there are times when because you have to find yourself in a position where you're playing, I play the violin, so I'm playing the violin in a really awkward position whilst walking backwards and trying to speak and try not to trip over the ribbon and try not to trip over the cello. It just sort of, and then to sort of maintain the central core of calmness is quite hard.
There's a kind of period I find in rehearsal process where you feel a little unstable, like, oh God, am I going down the wrong line here? Oh, what am I doing? And those questions that I think everybody has, or I hope everyone has. But that's this kind of stress that's not to be fretted over, I think. Tom said to me at one point in the proceedings that, you know, like, this is part of it. We are all going to be feeling stressed or nervous or apprehensive, and that's just normal because you're all working towards this date.
I've got a shorthand with the actors. I can make, they've memorised, I'd say, 80–85% of it. So I can make kind of jump cuts, as it were, in terms of the edits that we're doing. If we say, right, can we do this sequence now? And now I want you to do exactly the same, but the lyrics are going to be different, so it only affects the singers. That shorthand becomes much, much quicker as the process goes on, so that what starts quite slow, and it's about patience and tolerance of everybody at that point, then you can start really getting quick, and it becomes incredibly satisfying and exciting at this point.
She said more than Mr. Jackson. Like another lonely plane, like a stranger distant star. Sweet child, you can almost touch it.
But what's quite interesting is sometimes you do find yourself in the middle of a scene going, I'm saying these words, but I don't quite know what the rest of my body is doing. Help!
But I think, I suppose, of the Titty character, who's 9 in the play, and it's her equivalent really in the theatre and in the audience, who I think is quite a challenge for us to keep them interested in story, to give them enough to really, really stimulate their palates. And a really exciting thing for me would be if they wanted to play an instrument as a result of that, or if they wanted to sing as a result of that, or if they got interested in Neil's music as a result of that, because it's not the sort of music that they'll hear in a music theatre context.
Treasure we've taken while the world is sound asleep. Not to be finished before the dawn's breaking. Best to stay out of the way, hiding in shadows and quietly quaking. Even though it's plain as day, we're fanciful, fictional, all in your mind. No one comes to this island except those crazy birds. It'll be safe here.
That's land. Get out and pull her in. Now give me out with his chest.
Talkers talk, takers take. We will remember us when you awaken.
Excuse me, I'm awake.
You think you're awake, but you're very mistaken. It's a dream.
It seems so real.
A simple mistake anyone could be making. Can't you see? We're fantasy. We're fanciful, fictional, all in your mind. Oh, you can tell by the weight it's something worth having.
Nobody will find him now. We'll come back when the fuss has died down.
But tell me if you don't exist, how come we're having this great conversation?
Listen, Missy, it's like this. We only exist in your imagination.
Yes, I guess that would explain why you are singing, dancing and making all the strangest transformations. Fanciful, fictional, all in
I do speak to the designer and the director quite often over the whole process. But the frustrating thing is that we just don't have enough time to do it all. So it is just a mad dash to get it all done. This one is the Amazon's boat, and this is probably one of the most complicated things to build because I've never made a clinker-built boat before. And it's got to be light, it's got to be strong because actors and I think possibly the public might be touching it as well or holding it. And it's got to look really good.
We've got adults playing children. We don't want it to be corny or the costume to be sort of too overpowering in a childish way. We're dressing them in adults' clothing as much as we can and just giving them little things that are recognisable to a child's outfit. The actors have got lots of roles on stage, so as well as their character performances, they are puppeteering birds and boats and reeds and lots of things, and they're playing instruments, and we're separating them visually by giving them simple blue working overcoats and flat caps. As time goes on, they'll become almost invisible to the audience, and you'll only see the things that they're sort of puppeting or hear the music that they're playing.
Hopefully, by the time we get to the first preview, we will know pretty much exactly what we're doing and it'll just be finessing. But if it doesn't work on the first preview, then we will have to do major surgery. You know, that's the nature of the job.
We're standing by, everyone. Roger puppeteers, Trevor, Phelan, downstage centre, please. Okay, please can we run this section? Please. Okay, go and walk your route, please. Stuart Wright will show you the route, both boats together.
Okay, quiet, please. Thank you. Where you're ending up, and for her to know that it's safe to open the trap.
Thank you, Majesty. Most grateful, Your Majesty.
Molly, just look, don't do the trap.
We've still got another step to go. And that's the last station, yes. Okay, you ready to go from the same place?
Yep.
I've just gone straight through that flight case.
Okay, and that's much higher than we planned, Jimmy, isn't it? We were planning to check.
Yeah, man, that's not safe to jump on.
It should be up to his base.
That's not safe to land on.
This show doesn't have to make a profit. It does need to make its target, though. On a daily basis, it's a balance between what we've taken at the box office, what the projections look like, and what the demands coming out of the space are. And also, it is about investing for the long term. This show feels exciting right now. It feels like we're making something really special.
But there were sharks in there! Hundreds of them! Good! Mystery Michael!
Where is he? He can't swim, can't he? Bubbles!
Sharks!
The frightening thing is looking ahead. Now, it's complicated for us because next year we're also doing quite a lot of rebuilding.
We have a £19.3 million scheme to refurbish and redevelop this building in its entirety. 2016 is our 250th anniversary, and we want to be having a birthday party that is celebrating a completely reborn building, new facilities, front of house that bring the public in, back of house that are just brilliant for artists to work in, and to be a theatre that connects with Bristol.